Yamaninda, Dr. Phil Duncan Naya, Gomeroi Māori. That's hello. My name is Dr. Phil Duncan, and I'm a very proud Gomeroi man from the Northwest Slopes and Plains of New South Wales, Australia. And it's wonderful to travel halfway around the world. And very big Marabou, which is thank you for joining us today. As it is customary in my country and in our culture, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge country and people. I would like to acknowledge that we're on the foreign lands, not on our own lands. And the way that we have been received is nothing short of sensational. And the respect that we have been, how we've been treated is just wonderful. And we hope that today our session will be reflective of reciprocity, giving back, and the respect that we bring and the respect that we take. Most of all, I hope that we encourage the opportunity of thinking about greater collaboration. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge First Nations people and the electronic message sticks that are in the room. The First Nations people that join us today. I want to acknowledge both our Australian Embassy and our New Zealand Embassy people that have joined us from the lands of Aotearoa here and in Sweden. But most of all, I want to acknowledge you again for taking the time to be with us today. And I hope that you enjoy the wonderful range of speakers that are going to hopefully demonstrate our willingness to collaborate. We live in a world and move forward with a world of shrinking resource availability. And the question I pose to you as a group is, what price do we put on our ability to share our knowledge, to share our cultural science, our cultural way of life that has sustained us, particularly in my country, since time immemorial? It's a cultural science. It's for us, it's not traditional ecological knowledge. It's a science, the way we've interacted in a symbiotic nature with our country. And I say Marabou, and thank you. But I also acknowledge that I join you today. My homeland's a Maori, as I said. I also have very strong bloodline connections to the Wiradjuri Nation on the mighty Murrumbidgee River, where my grandfather was born, at a place called Warringazda, Darlington Point, and an Aboriginal reserve. More importantly, I want to pay homage to my grandfather and the lands that I know, the lands that I grew up on, the lands that have sustained me and my family, the Gomeroi. And the tree that my grandfather was born under still stands. It's my most sacred place, and it's where I gravitate to replenish my cultural soul and my energy, to stay in the debate and to create the opportunities and the platforms for a greater uptake of Indigenous knowledge, our cultural way of life, our cultural science. I'm also very proud to join you as the first Indigenous chair of the Murray-Darling Basin Authority's Basin Community Committee, which is 1,000 square kilometres. 1 million, sorry, what? Hey, 1 million square kilometres. And it's a position, not an Indigenous position. The committee, the Basin Community Committee, we have farmers, irrigators, environmentalists, local government, and it is a privilege and an honour to be able to guide those conversations and get those stakeholders to look at the future of the basin plan through a cultural lens, not just a rural or an industry lens or an environmental lens. I'm also very proud to be the first Indigenous board member of the Natural Resource Access Regulator in New South Wales government, and that is water compliance. So in a funny way, my mob say that I'm the top black cop in water in New South Wales, and it's a position that I take serious. Protecting the resource for our next generations, sustaining our environment, sustaining our culture and our cultural landscapes. It's part of me realising that potential, or that cultural obligation we have to care for and be involved in repairing country. Please, I want to share a couple of slides with you. The title of this, my talk, is Nothing About Us Without Us. But it shouldn't be on us alone. It should be with us, and with us leading. We use our totemic, our high value totemic species, mullein, the wedge-tailed eagle, strength, wisdom, connection, protection. Our footprints across our country since time immemorial. Our meeting places, both men and women, sitting together around our governance, making the decisions from our cultural position of life. We also have the opportunity, and we embrace every opportunity, to bring decision makers to come sit with us on country, to listen, look, learn, touch, and have a greater appreciation and understanding of this symbiotic relationship we have with country. I'm going to share a very personal story. Growing up, my grandfather said, "You know, boy," he said, "up here in the north of the basin, we are the lungs, 11 rivers, the Great Artesian Basin, and an international Ramsar site." He said, "We are the lungs of the Murray-Darling Basin." That's my country. Modern day technology to teach and educate people about this spiritual and cultural connection and cultural obligation. And then I had the wonderful opportunity to sit with Uncle Colin Walker, who turns 93 this year. A very proud Yorta man on the Dungala, not the Murray River, the Dungala. And I was talking to him about my grandfather teaching me about the lungs, and he said, "You know what? We're the kidneys." Our cultural science is interwoven into our art, our songs, our dance. It's a narrative, but it is a cultural science. And why do I talk about our arteries and our veins? You talk about rivers and anabranches. Because for our systems to be, we recognize our systems as being living, breathing entities. And for a whole of body, for us to be fully functioning, we need all our organs operating in unison, together, supporting one another. I hope that you, that description. I also had the wonderful opportunity to sit out on the Barker River with Uncle Badger Bates. And I took out very senior people from the Murray-Darling Basin Authority. And before we went to this site, we went out to a site called Mortonbooka, a very sacred site that has over 3,600, conservatively speaking, sites of significance: men's, women's, birthing chambers, camp ovens, cultural ceremonial sites. And this is Uncle Badger's hands talking about how these these lake systems and river systems are connected. Then I took the senior executives to this map. Look at it through a cultural lens before you look at it through a mainstream lens. We know our country, we know how country sustains us, and we know the cultural obligations and the responsibility that we have to educate people. Our cultural science could be the very game changer on how we protect country and sustain our future generations. Our traditional food sources, both not just for food, but also with medicinal values. Next slide, please. But it's not just about what you see on country. It's about our Aboriginal constellations. This is the dinner one in the Milky Way, my mother, my dreaming. This shot was taken at Siding Springs on my country, Coonabarabran, an astronomy site. I'll outline the dinner one. Legs, underbelly, up around the neck, the head, down around the back. Moon, Saturn, Antares, I don't know what the other one is. That's my country. That's my dreaming, my Aboriginal constellation. This image is taken on Yuin Walbunja country on the south coast of New South Wales, my wife's country. The same image. The message in there is, no matter where I go, my culture goes with me. My culture is in the room with me now. And I'm drawing strength on the ancestors that have provided me with the strength not to break down with this wonderful opportunity. So I'm going to open up today's session with some words that I hope help you have a greater understanding and appreciation of what comes after me, with three beautiful women and a brother from my country. Associate Professor Brad Mogridge and I, we same family, just same tree, different branches. But our culture is the same. The blood that runs through my veins runs through his. So in the Aboriginal worldview, people and country, including our lands, our waterways, wetlands and seas, they are independent entities that are intrinsically linked in the landscape through culture and spiritual significance. This means that there is no separation of nature and culture. The health of our natural environments and the cultural well-being of our people are directly influenced by the health and well-being of our cultural landscapes. Over these millennia, or since time immemorial, we have sustainably managed our lands, waters, wetlands, and our natural resources for the health of our countries and our people. We have understood the importance of water and its centrality to life, its centrality to our culture. And we have cherished it and managed it accordingly. Our traditional ecological knowledge, or our cultural science, like our stories, are passed down from generation to generation and continue up until this day, and will continue on from tomorrow. This has allowed us to live in a symbiotic relationship with our land and water. We've used it, we've lived it, we've nurtured it, we've protected it. Through our dispossession and then mismanagement of our lands and waters, and with the total disregard for our culture and our connection and knowledge and understanding of our landscapes, we have witnessed the detrimental effects upon our peoples and our environment and our cultural landscapes, because we exist in both harmony and in pain. When country is healthy and vibrant, we are happy. With the extractive industries and other harmful impacts on Gunama, our sacred Mother Earth, we're in pain. Colonial doctrines of terra nullius. When Australia was first discovered, terra nullius, we didn't exist, a land uninhabited. And reception and, the doctrine of discovery justified the English government's refusal to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as having any status in law and allowing the unjust taking of all property, and with it, the human rights of equality, the right of a cultural and spiritual way of life, and the right to participate in public life and decision-making about what happens to country. We have a right to live without discrimination, violence, oppression, and we have a right to self-determination. This is part of our DNA, our cultural DNA. Many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia, I want to just quickly reflect. The first climate change refugees in Australia was the Saibai Island people of the Torres Straits, 1947, where the rising sea waters drowned out the fresh water supplies. And they came onto Cape York Peninsula with the Injinu, Yamajiko, Mapoon and Bamiga people and negotiated to take up residence on mainland Australia at a place they can now call Seisha. Many Aboriginal people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia have, been marginalised. But, Aboriginal communities and Torres Strait Islander communities, we have complex knowledges. But it's based on our cultural way of life, our connection to country. Climate change is an environmental challenge that knows no boundaries. But Indigenous communities, we have a heightened risk. In 2008, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commissioner Tom Calmer of the time noted, as coastal and islander communities confront rising sea levels and inland areas become hotter and drier, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples faced the loss and degradation of our lands, waters, natural resources, and our cultural way of life. It also poses a major threat to our physical health of Indigenous communities. We talked about, I heard in the youth forum today, or the youth session with Seaweed, climate depression of our next generations. It's here. We will not be judged, we are being judged by the next generations on the state of the environment we are going to leave them. And I hope today that another message is it should be a call to arms for us to share our knowledge, share the journey, share the load, and think about what the future looks like, not through our lenses, but through our future's lenses. Ongoing access to country and its resources is essential for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Our cultural practices, our cultural way of life, the cultural methodologies in which we've interacted, repaired, cared for country, it's a science. And I strongly believe that, you know, Western science has validated our cultural science, fire stick management. And in the water arena can be the same. Some of our high totemic values, our native fish populations in the Murray-Darling Basin system are down to less than 10% since colonisation. Water quality, the impacts of industry, the demand. The challenge I put to the stakeholders and industry is not so much compromise. It's got to change our language. Are we willing to find a balance? Which is a better word, compromise, or can we find a balance together? Issues divide us. Challenges can unite us. The world can benefit, not just from in my country, called Australia, from Indigenous knowledge, but globally, because we as Indigenous people around this world, we talk into cultural mirrors. We are intrinsically joined at the hip through our cultural values and responsibilities to care for family and country. And when we talk about co-designing and being involved in the decision-making processes about the long-term future and sustainability of our systems, we talk in the mirrors. I ask you to think about your commitment to the Indigenous people where you come from. I asked Siwi, got no advice for Siwi, I've got a challenge for you. How many Indigenous people are in this year's conference? Can you create the opportunity for us to have two-way cultural knowledge exchanges? Are you willing to resource us to come together to add value to your strategies and policies and look at amending legislations and being involved in a global cultural alliance? Ban Ki-moon, there's no plan B because there's no planet B. These are the messages that I don't just take from today. These are the messages that have been handed down since time immemorial. My brother talked about being validated to 80,000 years. Well, you know, if it takes 230 years, and we watched how our country has been dismantled for the value of the dollar, I think it's time to think about a cultural economy that can sustain us. There are a couple of things that I believe, three core messages about innovation. We believe inquiry and discovery improves lives. Working together with and for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and other Indigenous communities globally to assist our people and communities to become productive decision makers in the water science arena. Integrity, we bring that to the table every day of our lives. And our lives are not from 9 to 5, it's 24/7. We all should conduct ourselves ethically, equitably, and for mutual benefit, inspire openness, courage, trust, and empowerment. We work with and for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander groups, and we hope to influence today a greater uptake to work in your domains with other Indigenous communities in other countries as a source to create a source of strength and creativity, enhancing the capacity of people and community in conjunction with the community that can be the very segue forward for us as Indigenous people globally to come together to help, to have dialogue, to help make informed decisions based on credible evidence and the collaboration of Western science and cultural science, and play our role as we move forward in a challenging world. And I say, we don't have a word for goodbye, because goodbye is definitive. So I'm going to go now, because Yanays will go, and I want to hand over to my Bawa, my sister, my collaborator in arms, to now open up our next session.
Thank you, Phil. It's such an utter privilege to be here today and to be working with this wonderful group of people. My name's Sarah Ransom. I'm the General Manager of the Australian Water Partnership. So I'll just move on. This is an interactive session, so we're going to have some speakers and then we're going to ask people to share your water stories with us. So have a think about something that really means something to you, and we'll start to share our knowledge and share our love for water together in the room. I'd just like to note that we have some Sami colleagues here with us today, so thank you very much for coming. We're so excited that you're able to make it. Thank you. And welcome also to the people who are joining us online. It's great to have that, that perspective as well. So before we kick off, I'll just point out we have water with us. So each of us brought water from our home rivers. Phil, I don't know if you want to talk about the cultural value of that.
Water connects us in this new age of thinking about systems thinking. When we as Indigenous people, we think in cultural systems, we think spatially, we think temporally, we think about our people upstream, we think about the obligation of country in our place, but we also think about that obligation of letting Gali, our water, to our communities downstream. Water connects us. And when our systems are disconnected, we are culturally disconnected. And I want to pay homage to my 3 Bawas and my brother, my Tagan, for, shouldn't say, I don't want you smuggling water into this wonderful country. But we wanted to clearly show that water connects us and our water stories. And please, as Sarah says, when we get into our yarning circle, it's a safe environment for you to be able to have courageous conversations with us, but we want you to share your water story with everybody in this room and globally.
Thanks, Phil. Let's get into it. I'll introduce our first speaker, which is Associate Professor Bradley Mogridge, is a proud Kamilaroi man, now living in Canberra. His current research role is in Indigenous water science. He's also a PhD candidate at the University of Canberra, along with a part-time Indigenous Liaison Officer for Threatened Species Recovery Hub. He has 25 years in experience in Indigenous engagement in water and environmental sciences. He sits on many committees and panels and personally is one of the busiest people I think I've ever met. His qualifications include hydrogeology, Master of Sciences, and environmental science. Take it away.
Thank you. There we go, that's me. That's my head. My kids call me an arse pro. They love that. So they get a giggle every time. The structure of what I want to talk about today, obviously, happy World Water Week. We're here to celebrate water and our challenge, and obviously groundwater is the theme. It was also the theme for International Water Day early in the year, and then obviously this year for Water Week, it's Seeing the Unseen, the value of water. And that's just right up my alley. I love it. So cultural value of water, I'll talk a bit more about that. Aboriginal people and groundwater. I did a paper a number of years ago, and I'll talk about the findings of that paper, and then talk about a methodology setting that I've developed, and hopefully the future that we can be involved with some of my conclusions. So this is my mob. So same as Phil's. He said same tree, different branches. I acknowledge the respective countries. You know, people online will come from all different parts of the globe. Kamilaroi, you can sort of see there, the map there. It's a fair chunk of southeastern Australia. So we're river people. We sit atop of the Great Artesian Basin, and that water is ancient water. It's millions of years old. So we have a lot of knowledge and connection and understanding with the driest inhabited continent on Earth. So water is a key part of who we are. And obviously 4 generations there, my nan, mum's one of 14, crazy amount of cousins, crazy amount. And then that old photo on the right there was found on one of the old missions where my nan's father was a boy and also her grandparents were there. So they were, they were mainly put on the missions and reserves and controlled back in the day. And then the kids down there, when they were a lot younger, at our sacred waterhole, Boober Lagoon. So Phil sort of mentioned a bit of this too. It's in our law, it's in our songs, in our dances, our dreaming stories, and our art. So we're not really written culture. It's very much an oral culture through song, but it's also through dance. And then those dances connect places, and a lot of those places are connected through water, of course. And so what I'm trying to do is get back to how our old people knew water, tell our stories our way, because I got tired of hearing non-Indigenous people telling our stories. I got tired of that. And I thought, I'm going to enter this space and infiltrate the system and tell my stories. Cultural safety, is a buzzword at the moment. Free, prior, informed consent as the United Nations Declarations of Indigenous People. In one of the articles, I want to lead in this space and culturally validate our science. So, I have a background in groundwater and also surface water, but also environmental science. I want my old people to validate our knowledge, to make sure where there's two-way science can happen, traditional knowledge and Western science, where they can come together, and my old people, my elders, can validate that. So in 2005, I did my master's at the University of Technology in Sydney and submitted the master's as Aboriginal people in groundwater. And then in 2020, I actually published it as a journal. So Emeritus Professor Angela Arthington said, you should publish your master's thesis. And I said, yeah, that sounds cool. I'm going to do that. And so 15 years later, I published my master's. So if you've got that paper sitting in the background, don't give up on it. Like, I wanted to look at how Aboriginal, mainly around Aboriginal people, how they, in licensing, do they actually hold entitlements? But most of the states don't have identifiers. So there's no, I know it's cliche, but there's no box to tick for Aboriginal people to identify themselves as a water holder. So I had no thesis then. So I thought, what can I do? And I thought about what's the relationship Aboriginal people have with groundwater. So I looked at the dreaming, our stories that are thousands and thousands of years old, survival on the driest inhabited continent on Earth, the artwork. So as soon as you move away from, coastal regions, groundwater is a key part of survival and water access. Our oral histories, our observations, but also the observations of the colonizer, the missionaries, the surveyors, the explorers, the police. So they all kept journals. So it was looking at some of those as well, and obviously up to modern day use. That's a map of all the different language groups of Aboriginal people on mainland Australia. So you can sort of see we're very diverse. We're all different. We have different languages. We have different the landscape. So, you can, down here, and we've got some alpine regions here. You've got the coastal regions. Then you sort of move over the divide here. This is arid, desert. Then you've got the tropics up the top, wet and dry season. And so I suppose our people have adapted to all those different landscapes. And I think that brings the diversity into how we are. So even language groups, this is Timaroi here, a couple of mobs over, wouldn't have a clue what they're saying. There might be some common words. So we don't have a common language in Australia. That's a real challenge for governments and when they're trying to talk to us. But that's the magnificence of our heritage, is that we're so diverse. We're not just Indigenous people. In that story, I found through the thesis, I found a lot of Dreamtime stories that are in the public domain. So they're actually been published, and I could republish them as part of the thesis. And these are around stories that connect of the creation of springs or the creation of waterways. And so they're really powerful to add that, we're sort of looking at thousands of generations of observation turning into a story that actually is understanding the old country, the way it was. And I think that old knowledge can come into a modern day context. And so, Boober Lagoon for me as well, it has a dreaming story linked to it with a snake with a crocodile head. And not too far away from our country, they've actually unearthed crocodiles in the centre of, the centre of New South Wales. So, our old people knew that there were crocodiles, and this part of the story was obviously to scare the hell out of us. So you don't go to the water after dark. You protect that water as it depends on your life. So obviously these dreaming stories, they have a role in how we protect country. And a lot of the things that I found was, there's culturally significant sites. So soakages, these are sort of shallow aquifers. You don't have to dig far into dry riverbeds. Native wells, so natural springs that are bubbling away. Mound springs in the drier country. We also have mud springs, and then rivers and streams that use base flow to actually flow. So they don't flow without groundwater. We also have wetlands that are highly dependent on our groundwater systems, and our sites include obviously cave systems. So there's a bit of difference between the cave systems and a lot of different nations. So some caves were no-go zones, taboo. You don't go there because at night these angry bats come out at night, bad spirits. You don't go there. But then there's other caves that were accessed for fresh water. And so some parts of the dry country, that they discovered that obviously there was a good set of fresh water in these cave systems. The recharge areas, which are important, paleo channels. So, there's stories that exist where the geosciences are connecting with traditional owners, and they're talking about, that used to be the old river system over there. Thinking, what? You're crazy, old man. But then they drill, and it's a paleo channel, so it's an old river. That story is told and retold, so that story could be tens of thousands of years old. Those sort of aspects are strong in certain parts of the world. And obviously, in Australia, we have fractured rock systems, porous rock systems, and hanging swamps in the sandstone country. So these are the values, so physical values, so living significance. So we modify trees as either for carrying dishes or that's the scarring. We also carve trees for ceremonies, but they're also very significant. They might represent death as well, burials. So some of the non-physical values, dreaming stories, landscapes, the rainbow serpent. So some people may have heard of the rainbow serpent. Our cultural heroes linking the spiritual to the physical. Educational values, that transfer of knowledge from generation to generation as part of the oral traditions. Our economic values as well. This was a story I found in an old journal. Anthropologist was engaging with the desert people, the Pintubi, and at the end of their time together, the old man gave the anthropologist a spear thrower, which is, it's a wooden implement that actually helps propel a spear at higher velocity and helps create more energy for that spear and accuracy. And each concentric circle was a water hole in that old man's country in the desert. So he knew his country to survive. So like modern day, it's like a GIS layer, so he knew his country. Every single one of those wells had its own traditional name. So potentially if that well dried up, that language would go with it as well. We have men's and women's business. Phil talked about that earlier. A lot of our groundwater sites on our country are women's places. So we can't even go there. It's a no-go zone. So if you're engaging with my mob, you're going to have to find women to actually start engaging about those. Massacre sites. So as the frontier started to move across the country, massacre sites are always close to water. They're in creek beds. Our mob were just pushed to areas next to water, pushed into the rivers, shot, burnt, whatever else. So they're sad places, but they're significant water places. Our ceremonial sites, when we got together, they're always around water. Our burial places, and obviously language, as I talked about a bit earlier. So it's, that connects us to place, to water as well. So one of my conclusions was, over many thousands of years, Aboriginal people have accumulated a comprehensive and astounding knowledge of groundwater. These factors need to be taken into consideration by governments, local, state and national, when planning decisions are to be made that may affect the quality and quantity of groundwater. If we want Australia to protect the resource for future generations, then Aboriginal people must be involved in the decision-making process. We're always advisory. We're never decision makers. We need to change that. That's why I'm infiltrating the system. Mullian, wedge-tailed eagle and barolga. So these are birds, if they're turning up to our water places, that's a good sign. So we watch the barolga dance. If you ever get a chance, watch the barolga dance on YouTube, Google it, because it's a really cool dance. Like it's amazing. And a lot of our nations mimic the barolga dance. And then obviously the apex predator, the wedge-tailed eagle. And if I ever go into witness protection, that'll be my name. Aquila audax. How cool's that? But don't tell anyone. Why am I still here? So there's been very little studies, especially around groundwater, looking at investigating groundwater and quality and quantity. However, even fewer studies have looked at the close cultural relationship Aboriginal people have with groundwater. This paper records the beginning of my research on relationships, dreamtime stories, cultural knowledge. My intention was and still is, so even from when I wrote it in 2005, to inspire other Aboriginal people and researchers to take this subject matter further. I thought I was the only Indigenous hydrogeologist in Australia, but I found two more, so my network has tripled. And I believe there's another young lad from Victoria, Southern Australia, that's doing his PhD. So just a bit about my methodology. So storytelling is central to our epistemologies. It's like our science communication. Our stories go in circles, not a straight line. You look at our gatherings, our corroborees, our yarning circles, our concentric designs in art. But however, our stories were perceived as myth and legend, tall tales, fables. So put in the realm of fiction, non-science, non-fact. And I suppose my challenge is as well, being a scientist as well, is to push our knowledge as equal. We're not acknowledged as those thousands of generations of observation and testing country and knowing country and surviving. So as Phil, he put out the invite as well, I'm putting it out there too, come and sit at our sacred fire and listen to some of the oldest water stories on the planet. My aim is to shift the paradigm away from my people as being the researched, which is constant. We call it the Toyota convoy of everyone trying to engage our people, lining up at communities. Yeah, I just mentioned, there's one of 3 known hydrogeologists. I have an obligation to be a voice. Fill the void of water management, be a voice for Kamilaroi, with Kamilaroi, by Kamilaroi. And I suppose we can be a champion of that. And Yane, I'm going now, they're on my river selfies.
Wow. Awesome. Just in my nervous opening, I forgot to mention that women are central to our lives. Women's water knowledge. And Brad and I stand before you with 3 beautiful women. They're not from our country, but we share the same passion. And we are champions for the women's voice, the missing voice. Now, which up here, sorry, I wish I could read. The other little thing about me too is that I'm the oldest of 127 grandkids. Yeah, no TV back in those days. My dad's the oldest of 12, 9 boys and 3 girls. And those stories, as Brad has said, have just been handed down from generation to generation to generation. And humour. We have a wonderful sense of humour because we get knocked down, but we keep getting back up. We're in it for the long haul. I stand before you, 3 beautiful women, your knowledge, and to be able to share this stage with you is just a wonderful privilege. And I now would like to take this opportunity to introduce Erina Watini Rawati, who's going to be... Erina Watini Rawati is an Indigenous Maori woman from the Waikato iwi, the tribe in Aotearoa, known as New Zealand. Erina grew up alongside the Waikato River, and her strong technical expertise in freshwater management sits alongside her community connections. Currently, she is a chief scientist Wow. Maori, Maori for the New Zealand Biological Heritage National Science Challenge. She has a background in river and lake restoration, Tonga species, research, Indigenous resource management, and environmental planning. She is experienced, way experienced, working at the interface between policy, how do I say that? Mātauranga Māori science. She is also a governor and is currently serving as a Crown appointment board member on the Waikato River Authority, an alternative director for the Te
Wai Māori Trust.
Te Wai Māori Trust. It's a pleasure and a privilege to introduce and present the mic to my sister, Elena.
Kia ora tātou. He te iwi taketake o tēnei whenua, ngā Sami, tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou. Katoa e manaki nei te karanga o tēnei kaupapa. Kua rangatira te kaupapa nei i a koutou. Hei aku rangatira otira, tātou katoa kua huihui mai nei. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings and acknowledgements, firstly to the Indigenous peoples of these lands, and then acknowledging everybody else that's joined us here for the session today. Kia ora tātou. I'm just going to talk a little bit about some Indigenous insights around my area of Aotearoa, New Zealand, which is the Waikato region. Taupiri is my mountain. Waikato is my river. Waikato are my people. So my tribe is from the North Island of Aotearoa. We have around 77,000 tribal members and 68 marae make up our tribe. Irina is my name. This is my whānau or my family. And those are some of the organisations that I'm affiliated with. In terms of my presentation today, I just wanted to share a little bit about the origins of the Waikato River Authority. So the Waikato River Authority is a catchment-wide co-governance arrangement over the Waikato and Waipa rivers, and it's between the Indigenous people and the Crown. Then I wanted to share a little bit of the learnings from that, but more than anything, I actually want to listen and hear the stories of you guys sitting out here, so I'm looking forward to that part. Oh, so I had to start. So to talk about our story, I have to go back in time. So back in 1863, in terms of where I'm from, the Crown invaded Waikato and confiscated 1.2 million acres of Waikato Tainui tribal lands. This confiscation is known as raupatu. Raupatu physically removed Waikato people from our lands, waters, and resources. This is, so the red shaded area is the Raupatu area, and it was a double blow to our people. So not only was the land taken, but the river was taken as well. And from that point forward, 1863, our people were excluded from decision-making, their rights and interests were denied, and it kicked off an intergenerational search for justice and redress. So this is a bit of a timeline of some key events from the time of the invasion and confiscation right through to settlement in 1995. So the gentleman on the right is the second Māori king, King Tāwhiao. Kingi Tāwhiao, he was the leader of the kingitanga during the land wars, the invasion and the confiscation period. And then between him and the settlement, there was 132 years and 5 generations, and each of those generations tried different approaches to try and address the raupatu that occurred. So now just skipping forward to 1995. So the lady in the middle, that's Te Ariki Nui, Te Whairangi Kahu, she is the Māori queen. She was the king's great-great-granddaughter, and she was the leader of the kingitanga at the time of settlement. The person to her right is her brother, Sir Robert Mahuta. He was the negotiator for the tribe who negotiated with the Crown to achieve the settlement. So the settlement was a land settlement initially. And what it included, these are some of the redress mechanisms. So there was an apology by the Crown, and that was signed by Queen Elizabeth herself. So that's this document here. It included the return of some lands, 3%. There was cash and interest, there was a relativity clause, and then there was an acknowledgement that we couldn't agree on all of the matters. So there were some outstanding claims. So the Waikato River was considered an outstanding claim, along with a few others. So moving on to the river itself, this is a statement straight from our settlement legislation, and I won't go through it all, but essentially for our people, the river is a tupuna or an ancestor. It's a single indivisible being, and we have a responsibility to protect and ensure the well-being of our river. Our relationship with our river and our respect for it lies at the heart of our spiritual and physical well-being and our tribal identity and culture. So the land settlement happened in 1995 and then skip forward 15 years and we got to the river settlement. So this was in 2010 and the co-negotiators at that time were Tupiroirang Morgan and Lady Raiha Mahuta. And the beneficiary of the river settlement was the river itself. And there are two key principles, mana o te awa and mana whakahaere, which are about the spiritual authority of the river, and then the authority, rights and control. These were the other mechanisms that were part of that. So there were ministerial accords between the tribe and the Crown. There were joint management agreements. Our tribe had the ability now to write their own fisheries regulations and bylaws. There was the return of some river-related lands. And we had the ability to prepare a vision and strategy, and there was some for the whole river catchment, and there was some funding associated with it as well. So getting to the co-governance part. So directly as a result of the tribe's treaty settlement, a co-governance board was established over the whole Waikato Waipa River catchment. So the Waikato River is the longest river in Aotearoa, and the board is made up of 5 iwi reps and 5 Crown reps. And so each of the river iwi appointed 1 rep each, and then the Crown appoints 5 through the Minister for the Environment. So these are the names of the 5 other river iwi that are stretched out along the whole Waikato and Waipa rivers. So Waikato Tainui, that's the one that I belong to, Raukawa, Te Arawa River Iwi Trust, Tuwharetoa and Maniapoto, they all have 1 rep each. And then the Minister for the Environment appoints 5 as well. So this is the current board. I think 2 people were having a sickie that day, so there are only 8 board members, and we also have the Minister for the Environment there too. So he is the 4th one from the side, and that's the Honourable David Parker. And so the board has co-chairs, so there's an iwi chair, iwi co-chair, and that's Tipa Mahuta, who's next to the Minister. And then the Crown has a co-chair as well, and that's the lady in the pink. That's Paula Southgate. She's also the mayor of Hamilton City, which is the largest city in our region. So the purpose of the Waikato River Authority is to set the primary direction, policy setting direction for the Waikato region, and that's through the vision and strategy that I talked about earlier. We have an advocacy role, and we also fund rehabilitation initiatives for the Waikato River. So the name of our vision and strategy is Te Ture Whai Mana o Te Awa o Waikato, and it's actually guided by a saying or a whakatauki from the second Māori king, who I showed you his image earlier, which is tōku awa koiora me ona pikonga he kura tangihia o te mapamuri. So the river of life, each curve more beautiful than the last. And within the strategy itself, there are a bunch of objectives and vision statements, etc. This is how the vision and strategy influences policy throughout the region. So up the top there is where the vision and strategy sits up the top there. It has the same status as a national policy statement. It sits directly in the regional policy statement. This has to give effect to the vision and strategy. And then the regional policy statement influences the coastal plan, the regional plan, and the district plans of all of the district councils. So, and then they influence all the actions in the region. So essentially it sits at the top of the food chain there. Jumping straight to rehab initiatives. So a few years back, we developed the Waikato and Waipa River Restoration Strategy. This was developed by a bunch of technical scientists who are wanting to know if we're going to invest money in restoration, how we're going to get our best bang for buck. So that's made up of it. But then we also had another work stream where we went to each of the 5 river iwi, and they all got to decide what were the priorities for them. So they also sit in the strategy too. So you've got the technical priorities, and then you have the iwi priorities, which sit in the strategy. The strategy influences the funding. So we invest 6 mil a year in terms of restoration activities. And then we just recently issued our 5-year report. So in the last 5 years, we had invested in projects that had resulted in over 2 million native trees and plants being planted in the catchment, 64,000 non-native trees. So those are mainly in high erosion areas. Nearly 400 kilometres of fencing for stock exclusion and stuff along the waterways, 400 community events, which had over 10,000 people attend. Just a bit of a snapshot. We also have developed a report card for the Waikato and Waipa River, and so that's based on Māori knowledge and science knowledge again, bringing them together, and then they kind of work out what a grade is for the river. And so and it's based on these different, they call them toda or inputs, I suppose. And so the overall grade, I think it was 2017, was a C+. And what we're hoping to see over time is that that grade will get better as more and more investment goes into the catchment, and hoping that our restoration activity is going to make a difference. And so Mātauranga Māori or Māori knowledge, our traditional knowledge, language and practices are woven throughout everything we do in terms of managing the river. We encourage and fund projects to continue to extend and build on that Mātauranga. So those are just 4 examples of projects I guess, opportunities to further develop Māori knowledge in regards to fishery, water management in our catchment based on the tribe's knowledge. I added this bit here because in our country, Māori language nearly died out like 40 years ago. And so what they did, a group of people pulled together these preschools and only taught them Māori as trying to like bring back the language. And so the elders that still retain the language were with the preschool kids. And now, so that was 40 years ago, they just celebrated their 40th birthday of kohanga reo. But now you can go through from kohanga all the way to a doctorate in Māori language now, which is a new thing. And so I guess that's because you're now having people who are coming out who only reo Māori is their first language. It's sort of spreading across everything in Aotearoa. So it's going into all the strategies, the plans. We had our first Māori public holiday based on Matariki this year. So it's really growing and developing for us. So just to end, I have some learnings for me. So for me, there are multiple ways of knowing, being and doing. No one knowledge system is more important than another. Local inclusive models of water management and governance can be effective. The importance of Indigenous knowledge and water and contemporary water management in Waikato is essential. This model was created thanks to the hard work, blood, sweat and tears of our ancestors that did that intergenerational search for redress. Our settlement has also informed improved water management across the country. So after our settlement happened, there's been a national policy statement for fresh water, which has kind of borrowed heavily off some of the work that was developed through this settlement as well. So we're happy about that too. I just wanted to say it's not perfect. There's always room for improvement, but we are all there in the best interest of our river. And there's still work to be done. We have conservation law reforms going on. There's iwi rights and interests in fresh water that's topical. And we also have the 3 waters reforms, but I didn't have enough time to talk about it all. But so thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to hearing you later.
Thank you, Erina, for your brilliance and very generous sharing of your your work and your home country. So I'll just introduce our final speakers. Coming to us from Thailand, I've got Sangwari Suwirakan. She's the secretary of the Shan Women's Action Network Foundation. She belongs to the Thai Yai or Shan from the Chiang Mai, northern Thailand. Sang is a secretary of the Swan Foundation. She's also selected from the Shan Women's Network to join the Indigenous Women's Network of Thailand committee. She's also been part of the steering committee of the Network of Indigenous Women in Asia, supported by the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact since 2020. Welcome, Sang.
Sorry,
I forgot Sacheta as co-presenting.
Yes.
Yes. Oh my God. I'd also like to introduce Sacheta Sim, who's Mekong Regional Program Manager from Oxfam. Sacheta was born and raised along the Mekong River in Cambodia, and she currently serves as the Regional Program Manager of Oxfam in Cambodia. Sacheta manages the portfolio of Mekong Regional Water Governance Program since 2014 to promote inclusive civil society engagement in water resources management and governance, with a particular focus to enhance the voice, agency and leadership of women and most marginalised groups in the water governance decision-making process. Prior to this role, Sacheta served in various roles in international organisations aimed at promoting women's rights and women's empowerment, gender equality, health policy research and grassroots research. Thank you, Sang and Sacheta. I will hand over to you now.
Thank you so much for having us. Just to briefly explain, we will be co-presenting. Both of us are from the Mekong region, and Mekong, as you may know, means the mother of the river. So I will first let Sang talk about her river, and then as Dr. Phil asked us in the beginning of the session that how many Indigenous women are here. I will not speak for myself, but I will speak for the women that are not here today through the key message that we would like to share. So I will give the floor to Sang now.
Thank you. My Sungha, that is Shan, it's meaning hello. My name is Sang. I belong to Chan Group and I'm from Chiang Mai, northern of Thailand. It has been my great honor to join the World Water Week 2022. I got support from AWP, Oxfam, and AIPP. Thank you for give me a chance and let me share my story. My grandfather said, "Kon kin nam, am yam han ton nam. Kon kin khao, am yam han ton khao." The meaning is, people who drink water have never seen the watershed. People who eat the rice have never seen the rice plant. Our Chan people has learned from generation to generation that water is life. To protect water means protect our and other people's life. This is your duty. My grandpa always said that. Yes, this is the map that I'm going to show you that how Kok River connect to Mekong. And then the blue dot over there is where I am from, at the Thai-Burma border. I'm going to share about Kok River, one of important river which connect to Mekong Basin. Kok River has been divided into three parts. The upper part over there is in Burma, and the middle part where I am from, and the last part is in Chiang Rai and connect to Mekong. This is the first peak that we have been recorded in my community since 1952, and three different. It's more people and more village now. Along Kok River, from upper basin to where I am, There are around 8 indigenous groups that live since our great-grandpa. There are Chan, here is mine, and Lahu, Lisu, Aka, Karen, and Ilmian. Each group have different way of the traditional life to survive relate to the river. And I'm going to share about the Chan traditional life. The life of along the river, we are farming, fishing, and connect with the other indigenous group almost by boat. There are walking way beside the river, but 1952 on that time, we have a walkway, but because of we are in the rainforest, it's too dangerous because on that time it's still tiger and elephant around. So both solution. So relate to my culture, each year we have a water festival. It's very important for almost indigenous people. This festival connect the young generation to old people when the festival come. And we throw the water on the elder parents, older people, and that means we pay respect to them. And then they wish us to have a good life, to have a good job in the year, something like that. And then we also have the second piece, how our Chan people pay respect to the river. We believe that there are spirit of Buddha who take care of the river. Each year we make the spirit rafting house to flow in the river to pay respect to the river. In the rafting house, we put all our crop that we grow in our farm and whatever that we found to pay respect to the river. We thanks to the spirit of God that give us the water, watching, farming, and for the whole year. And the last one is every full moon day. You know, the river is like the school for us. You know, every full moon day, the monk come to shave their hair, and then to clean themselves before go to the temple. For me, with the river, it's just like school. I have learned swimming, I have learned fishing, and I learned how to find clean water from the river. According to it's like when the school holiday, it's been like meeting point for us and with other indigenous group which stay along the river. We learn each other culture from the river that we connect together. And also, I also learn for other indigenous women group, they are collecting the flower, the bark from the tree, and the mud from the river to drive the yarn and to make our clothes. I also learn what kind of seed that we can grow in near the river because it need more water, and what kind of the seed that we not need too much water. And then to transferring the knowledge is almost from women. This is the way of our life. You can see from my dress, this is how my mother or my grandmother transferring the knowledge to us. This is like a river flow, and then this like a butterfly, rice plant, something like that. Yeah, I'm modern. Yes, we also have income generation from the river, from our homestay and from tourist business. The bamboo rafting is starting from my town to other village. On the way, tourist people stop on the way at different indigenous village to learn our culture, try our food, and buy our product and learn our traditional life. This way is to make people understand and recognize more of indigenous people. Yes, before 1991 in Cook River, we can catch fish. The size is like 100 and 130 kilo. With the traditional method that you have seen during the rainy season, fish from Mekong River come to Cook River. There are many kinds of fish that we found. We can catch fish, or we catch fish just for the family and to sell in the village, not for big business, just for enough to survive. After 1991, the development project is affect to our indigenous people who live along Cook River. There are Payang Mon Dam was construction. It is cut lower Cook Basin to transfer the water to Chiang Rai city. This is the next. Yeah. This is the to transfer the water to Chiang Rai city. More and more people move to Chiang Rai, and then the big mega project, big construction, build the house is become built in the Chiang Rai. Around 130 kilometers from Cook River, there are around about 30 sand suction port. The sand from Cook River is used construction business. Example, like build a house. There are another big mega project that use a lot of sand from Cook River is R3A and R3B highway, which will connect Thailand to China with the map, the yellow one that you see. And then another one is the Upper Cook Basin. There are big effective to our indigenous people from 28-year coal mining project that the MOU have been signed in 2019. Mueang Kok in Chan State, that is the head of the Cook River. This had been the host of this project is a Thai company and the Burma Army owned. Another project that affect to Chan people is coal mining project next. Coal mining project in Golden Triangle. The project cover more than 456 kilometers. Since the project start in 2007, the project damaged Mekong River. Chan people and other indigenous village can access to the water anymore because of the pollution. The village head was killed because of leading the Chan people to protest to against this project. The company who hosts the project, they paid like 300 USD per year to the family, those who farm damage from the project. This is how we are suffering and we are facing now and the government doesn't care of all these projects are in Burma. We not against the developing, but only involve us in the planning and in the decision-making process. The project should also benefit for indigenous people, and the project should not destroy our traditional life. Please treat us like a human, as we are human. Thank you.
As you have heard from the story that Siang and her people are suffering, I just move you a little bit further to the Mekong part in Cambodia and share a little bit about indigenous people in Cambodia. So similar to Shan people that Siang represent, indigenous people in Cambodia living along the watershed, and with many development projects that happen along the Mekong River and the tributary river have caused the impact onto them, mostly due to the hydropower dam construction that have meant that they have to relocate to a new place. In this picture, in the middle is indigenous Charai and Krung from the northern part of Cambodia. I chose this story in particular because they are coming from the village that's situated between hydropower dam upstream and also downstream of the river. So the challenges that they are facing is that when the dam operation open the water gate and it come in a big volume of water and flooded the community and take lives, animal and agriculture production that the people are depend on. And I think similar to the story that Seng have told us, the situation of the people in this area facing strongly is that they are not being involved in the process where it concerns them and their lives. And this is the very important message that local people have to be part of the process. When we talk about governance of the water, of the river, we ask the question, who is actually sitting at the table? And we are missing some very important element, especially community that are affected by the project, indigenous people, people with disability, other marginalized population, they are not there at the table. I just want to link a little bit to some of the very significant elements in the nature that are central to the ways of life of indigenous people. As we can see here, there are some important sites in this picture is from the north of Cambodia, linked to the sacred forest that indigenous Charai pay very strong respect to. The picture on the right, on the top is a sacred rock along the Mekong River in Kyrgyz province, where they often celebrate the traditional ceremony to ask for safety and good health, and also welcome new people when entering into the community. And down below is also indigenous celebration in terms of village festival, especially when we have newcomer coming into the area. So this very important part of life of indigenous people in recent years has been disrupted due to the development project that have happened along the river and make them displaced from their local community. So I mentioned earlier about the water governance and what it meant for indigenous people, and I just like to quote this part from the report that the UN Special Rapporteur has illustrated, which signify about the knowledge of indigenous people. So long before the development of the modern science, which is quite young, indigenous people have developed their ways of life, of knowing how to survive, and a lot of ideas about meanings, about purpose, about value, and the term scientific knowledge. So scientific knowledge in a way is understand that traditional knowledge is contemporary and dynamic and of equal value to other kinds of knowledge. We have been working through the network of indigenous women in Asia, such as NIVA network and the AIPP Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, to create space and platform for indigenous women, their voice and agency to be presented, especially when policy environment and discussion are happening. And this is just some of the examples where AIPP and NIVA network together with Oxfam, we have tried to assert the place and space for women, indigenous women who have their voice heard. And I just like to have the final point for this session with 5 key messages. And these key messages is actually linked to the conference that was talked about during the high-level panel earlier this afternoon in Dushanbe in Tajikistan. So during this conference, there are 5 key messages that have been put forward as a way to promote the involvement of indigenous women and indigenous people in particular. And I just like to highlight some of the important message here. that I think linked to also the session that was talked about earlier in this week. The importance of participation, which means that we need to promote inclusive, effective, and culturally appropriate participation of Indigenous people and the local community in the design of their own water program, in order to influence some of the important global water agenda. For example, we need to increase the number of Indigenous women and local community in creating the synergy in the different process that are running by the key organization. Also, it is very important in terms of supporting the creation of space for dialogue, in which Indigenous people can discuss the water issue and manage their own agenda. I think it is enough that the agenda is set from outside, and it is the time that Indigenous people need to set the agenda for the matter that is very close to heart and close to home. The other important message that I want to highlight is around Indigenous people's rights, bringing the attention to the Indigenous people's rights who are at the forefront of water conservation, especially in the context of international cooperation and the extractive industry. I think we have heard from Seng's case study and also shared earlier by our team. The issue that some of the Indigenous community are facing, especially violence against Indigenous women and girls, it must stop. We also heard about how Seng have learned about some of the important knowledge from her grandmother, from her mother. So it is very important that the intergenerational knowledge transfer be maintained and preserved, because supporting this means that we restore and revitalize and reclaim the Indigenous knowledge system and language. So acknowledge that Indigenous women and youth are the holder of much of this knowledge is really essential agent for change. Thank you very much.
Wow. We're running short on time, but in our life, in our cultural way of life, time is not the issue, it's the outcome. As I stand with my Bawa, Sarah, I hope that you could see the collaboration. We've made a commitment to share the load, share the journey, create the opportunity, and build a platform built on integrity and respect and inclusion. I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the company that I work for, my CEO, who has supported me and traveled with me. But more importantly, the first time in my 40 years in Aboriginal affairs, a CEO, long before I joined the company, took the time to come to my country to see what makes me tick, makes my family tick. Peter O'Connor and DFAT, thank you for all the work behind the scenes. Shreya and Lucia, where are you? There you are. These beautiful women from AWP support us, help us, and structure us. I want to acknowledge Iselina and Natalia, the impact you had on us, and your session. I hope that we haven't entertained you because we would have failed you. I hope that we have challenged you to think through a cultural lens, to be more confident in reaching out and walk with us, because that's the way of the future. We believe. I want to acknowledge my family, Brad, associate professor, your willingness to always be available to teach me, help me be who I am. Erina, Socheta, saying amazing, amazing women, as with and many other Indigenous women in here. There's a couple of things. Your story is important. Indigenous people's stories are important. You've seen it. It's been clearly demonstrated that, you know, our knowledge is not from yesterday. Western science, ours has been since time began, as a collective, and water unites us. So at the end of this, we want you to please come up and we want to get a photo of you with us. And I hope that that opportunity gets you to take away some of us, some of our culture, some of our passion about being better together. For little young people like this young woman, but I hope that you become an environmental engineer and an environmental champion. I hope we can influence that. The last thing I want to do is leave you with a story of my grandfather. You might have to jump in. Remember to stop and listen to the silence. The voice of the wind will always give you strength, but always be loudest in your dewey, your soul. Your million, your spirit, will always feel the energy from those that have walked before us. To block out the noise of the world. Find a tree, allow your feet to touch the duwu, the earth. Our spirit ancestors have created the balance of the universe. The center is Ganama, our sacred Mother Earth. Our peace has and always will be the oneness with everything. One center is oneself. So break a branch like my grandfather did and walk. Allow your pathway to see everything. Hear, feel, touch within. Know who you are, to see all that you are connected to and know that you belong. Cultural faith is our supreme power. Never forget those that have come and walked before us and that continue to walk amongst the stars. Ganama, our sacred Mother Earth, has us in our keeping, our country. So today we honor the past. We respect the present. And we hope that we've created a greater commitment and curiosity to share a vision of a prosperous and reconciled country that benefits our future generations. And I say, no.
Thank you, everybody. That was an incredible experience for me. I'm sorry we didn't get the chance to share our stories, but sometimes time expands, sometimes it contracts. We don't have a lot of control over that sometimes, but beautiful to have you all here. And as Phil said, we'd really love to take a photo with everyone who is present with us today. So please, if you could come up the front before leaving, we'll take a picture. Oh, Phil's got a presentation.
The impact that you had on us, and particularly me, I've got a message stick from my country. I would like to present this message stick from my country to you, Selena, and know that you are welcome and always be protected by the spirits of our ancestors. And I want to thank you for your generosity and your knowledge that started this week off on a wonderful platform for us. So, please bear with us, because we all want to take you home with us.
Muchas gracias. Sí, se ponte aquí de lado para que
Para
puedan.
mí es un honor.
For me, it is an honor to receive.
Yo sé que esto es algo
I know this is something very big, very part of you. It is for us, for our Wayu tribe. It's something that I receive and I will cherish with all my heart. Thank you very much. I also have a present for you.
Esto representa
This represents
a la tierra,
our Mother Earth,
la mujer.
the woman, the female, where we are all born.
Esta
The womb of Uma represents the Wayu women,
y
the carrier of water.
la artesanía que hacen mis niños.
And this is what my kids do. They do art
Pero también regalársela.
artisanal, and I wanna give this to you from our YU children.
Y quiero que conserves
And I also want you to keep this flag. It's a flag of the YU tribe.
de representar
We had to represent ourselves
como lo hacen los arihunas.
like the foreigners do with a flag. So
Los arihunas allá se
the foreigners represent themselves with flags, you know? So YUs
representan
were forced to do the same. So we created a flag to represent our big YU nation so that we could ask for the respect that they ask us through a flag. And this is for you. From all the YU family